It's time to get clear, get heard, and get paid. And join us on our Soul Business Retreat. Attract your dream clients and income over 3 nights as we shape your passion into a business that makes a profit. Follow our 13 steps to reach 5K in 30 days in the beautiful Byron Bay. Whether you're starting, growing, or expanding your business, our all-inclusive 3-night retreat is the place for you. Check out the details in the show notes, and we hope to see you soon. Welcome to Willow Healing Matters, the podcast. We are so excited to have you joining us on this journey where we explore different ways to empower your soul, whether it's healing in your kitchen or all the way up in the corporate world. Come with us as we look into different ways to heal your mind, body, and soul. Hey everyone, it's Catherine from Willow Healing, and today I have with me Peter J. Boney, who is an author, a senior advisor, and an advocate. At 49 years old, Peter experienced identity trauma after learning quite by accident the man he knew to be his father was not biological. Peter was conceived with the help of a Harvard University fertility specialist and an anonymous sperm donor. This discovery led to his 22 years of deep introspection and research to find the source of his seed. Once a venture capitalist, former high-tech CEO, and award-winning entrepreneur, board chairman, non-profit leader, special operations combat veteran, and avid mariner, he is now also a keynote speaker, best-selling author, donor-conceived rights activist, and a founding contributor of the US Donor Conceived Council. So welcome to the show, Peter, and I'm excited to explore this with you.
Thanks for the invitation.
So I guess with anyone, we all go through this identity crisis of who we are, but I guess it was at a whole different level for you, right? Especially being at 49 and so successful in your businesses and everything. How did that curiosity and that conversation come to light?
Well, up until this point in time, I really thought I credited three things for the person that I had become. One was somewhat of a disruptive childhood. I moved around to a variety of schools, 11 different states between the first and the 8th grade, I think 11 different schools. So my dad was sick. And I credited that experience with my adaptability.
Yep.
Secondly, I had some service in Vietnam as a special operations infantry lieutenant, running a team leader in Vietnam, and that was a difficult experience. But I credited my collaborative leadership style to that experience. And then my college education really opened doors of opportunity for me that I never expected. So I took all those things in and took my DNA for granted.
Yeah.
Right? Now, all of a sudden at age 49, I'm not quite who I thought I was. And the secret unloaded when my mother had an open heart surgery she had a post-operative stroke after open heart surgery, and all of the locks that guarded her secret just didn't work anymore. And it came out in conversation with others that were visiting her at her rehab center. So she didn't tell me directly. My wife told me.
Oh my goodness. That's even worse.
So at that time as well, my wife and I were undergoing a marital crisis at the same time. So it was a lot of emotional upheaval. For me, the lies that I was told about my heritage were meaningful because I made some decisions in my life based upon false information. My dad was, I mentioned, sick. He was suffering from unipolar depression. Now, as a younger man, he could shake that off, but as he got older, he had more and more difficulty shaking that off. The last 4 years of his life, he was hospitalized in and out, didn't work anymore. And when I was 16 years old, he took his own life. So old school Italian families, hush, don't talk about this. Don't let anybody know. Don't let them think that this is a reflection upon us. So I felt a little flawed in that regard, but I kind of bought into the hushing of that and didn't talk about it. And as a result, I didn't properly grieve for my dad's death either. So I had this resurging of grief upon learning that he was not my heritage. Uh, I had a, well, I'll call it a uh, Scarlett O'Hara moment myself at age 16
Yeah.
during his funeral. I'll never be weak. I'll always be strong. Uh, I'll beat this. I won't let it lick me, and I won't talk about it either. I won't let anybody know.
Yeah.
Um,
Put it in the boat, throw it in the back. Yeah. Yeah.
so the the Vietnam experience was something else again too. PTSD was something that they talked about 30 years later. After that experience, I came home in November of 1970 after 15 months on the ground and was greeted by my fellow citizens. They attacked me at a restaurant when I was wearing my full uniform, uh, basically anti war protesters. So that reinforced the idea of don't talk about the experience, don't let anybody know. They're going to call you a baby killer and
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
So I had another stifling opportunity to deal with the trauma, and I just swept it under. So this new trauma, this identity trauma, just created a real surge. Uh, my friends and my family alike all encouraged me to seek a little bit of therapy on that. Well, the old school that I saw both in the boardroom as well as in the war room is if you're weak and needy, maybe you're not fit for command.
Yeah.
And people that need therapy might be weak and needy. Well, I was a CEO at the time. I didn't want to be unfit for command, but I did seek some therapy very quietly, discreetly. And I had to cycle through a couple of different therapists before I found one that was really adequate for me to deal with the trauma. And what I learned from him is he said, "Well, son, congratulations, you hit a trifecta because new trauma, this identity trauma that you just have experienced, rekindles old traumas you thought long past. The death of my dad, the way he died, not dealing with it effectively, still grieving for him, was traumatic. I had that resurge of grief. And I had a lot of anger as a result of my Vietnam experience as well.
Yeah.
And my marital crisis was principally because I had adaptive behavior of not talking about things that were upsetting or creating anxiety for me, thereby robbing my wife of some degree of emotional intimacy with me. I just thought I was doing the right thing, never be weak for my family, always be strong for my family.
Yeah. And it's definitely that, because I come from an Italian background too, so I fully understand that it's not an old thing, the hush mentality. It's still going. So even when I divorced my first husband, it's like, shh, we don't talk
Yeah.
about it, and it's so it's such an important point that you bring up, because when we keep burying the trauma and not actually sit with it and feel it, then it's going to keep bubbling up. And like your therapist said to you with the three trifecta, that's normally then if you don't address it, then your body goes into and you go into a state of tragedy where all these other things come up health wise and things like that. So, how did that
Yeah.
then spark your curiosity to start researching that more?
Well, they say that it's not the marathon that wears you down; it's the stone in your shoe. And
Yeah.
I was dealing with those three stones in my shoe, and my mom had given me some clues as to the name of the doctor and the location of the clinic and so forth. Uh, she, after 50 years and her stroke, she misremembered some things. So I was chasing clues that just did not exist. And I had this rage of what I'll call what was called genealogical bewilderment. That
Interesting.
was a term that was coined in the 60s by a pair of psychologists that were dealing with adoptees and some of the adoptees' failure to adapt. Well, in the old days, they called donor conception semi-adoption to make it a little bit more socially acceptable. So I was feeling all of that rage of genealogical bewilderment. What was my heritage? What was my genealogy? If I'm not Northern Italian, what am I?
Yeah.
What's my health history? If that's not important, why does the doctor ask you every time you go to a new doctor what your health history is?
Yeah.
So I had half a history or I had a fake history. And I was brought up as an only child. Did I have any siblings? Did I ever date a sibling or worse?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. So that genealogical bewilderment just raged inside of me, and I was chasing clues that didn't exist. There were no records kept when I was conceived in 1945. So my only recourse, I thought, was to do a deep dive of research into the very science that enabled my creation to begin with. So I researched the sociological, the legal, and the scientific history and the evolution of assisted reproductive technology, really looking from biblical times right through to the present day.
Mm.
And what I found was an industry that was never illegal, but always on the hush hush, uh, secretive. And the doctors told their patients, don't tell anybody, don't even tell your child. Uh,
Interesting.
you can keep this a secret by the practice that we have, and that is let the woman claim that the husband was the father of the child, use an obstetrician that didn't know anything about the fertility practice, then he can sign off that the father was actually the husband was actually the father of the child.
Mm. Mm.
So my birth certificate was a hoax
Yeah.
in that regard. That was all a hoax. That was the standard practice.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is really intriguing because I guess it's not so much a stigma around it now. Like everyone knows, like, oh, I had to use a sperm donor or whatever it might be. But obviously, the generation that your mother chose to go down that path, and knowing that Italian heritage too, where it's like, the man's job, to help create a baby, there's so much to unpack there in terms of how that would have impacted you with all your questions as well. And then, again, reinforcing that, oh, we're not meant to talk about it.
Well, you have a lot of changes that have taken place sociologically and certainly scientifically. 17% of couples are said to have fertility issues.
Yeah.
40% from the man, 40% from the woman, and 20% they share some fertility issues. The fact is that since 1980, according to research, the fertility of the Western Hemisphere has decreased deep down by 50%, 50%.
Mm, just
And
concerning.
the acceptance of fertility issues, the society is much more accepting of fertility treatment and fertility issues. Now you have same-sex couples and single people seeking uh, a child or a creation of a family. And I'm all for science to enable wanting people to have a family, just with some consideration for the person that is created by the science, people like me.
Yeah.
Uh, Even though the society has evolved and are more accepting, I've found that the regulations on this industry, and it is an industry, multi billions of dollars of an industry today, are just non existent. There's no legal requirement for genetic testing of a sperm or an egg donor or an embryo.
Just
There's
concerning.
no
Yeah.
requirement for health history
Mm,
or the updated health history.
yeah.
There's no requirement for a sibling registry. There's no restriction as to the number of offspring per donor. There are people that have over 100 siblings today.
Just crazy.
I nobody can look at me in the face and say, "Well, that sounds right to me. That you have 100 siblings, unknown to you, unknown to you."
Yeah.
Does that sound right to anybody?
No.
Um,
But I guess it's
there's no
just,
requirement for counseling for the
yeah.
donor or the recipient of the donor's gamete regarding the needs of the donor conceived. And most importantly, too, there's no legal consequences for blatant fertility fraud.
Mm,
Either, for instance, the doctor using his own sperm on countless numbers of patients, that's happened,
mm,
or a donor, for instance, stating that he's uh, lying about his background, he's a PhD and speaks 6 languages, when really he's a convicted felon and a schizophrenic, real cases.
yeah,
And
yeah.
then 36 of his offspring all have issues as a result.
So interesting. It's just,
So there's when I first learned about this industry and some of the practices, I exposed this to a friend of mine that said to me, Pete, I used to breed Rottweilers, and I'll tell you that breeding puppies has greater regulatory oversight than conceiving human beings. Livestock, there's greater regulatory oversight.
yeah.
Canine, swine, bovine, equine.
Well, it's
So
really,
I thought that this could be a pretty thought-provoking book,
yeah,
but I couldn't write a book until I answered my own questions. Every time I began to open up the circle and tell my story, I got the same questions that I couldn't answer. Well, what's your genealogy? I don't know. I don't know what my genealogy is. What's your health history? I don't know. Do you have any siblings? I don't know. I don't know. I just I couldn't write anything until I finished my story.
yeah.
Well, I learned this in 1995, and that was 12 years before 23andMe invented DNA over the internet. And in 2008, Time magazine declared that 23andMe had the invention of the year. So I was very excited, very quietly taking my $1,000, $999 DNA test as an early customer.
Yeah.
I was very disappointed to learn that I couldn't find the source of my seed
Yeah.
in that. I learned that, well, I wasn't Northern Italian. I was English, French, and a sliver of Scandinavian. Well, I can live with that. But I was a new customer. And I thought if I just wait it out, they'll continue to add to their database and eventually somebody will show up. Well, 9 years later, nobody showed.
Wow.
And I was really super frustrated. My then adult children taught me about this new company, this other company called Ancestry.com, that in 2012 started selling DNA over the internet to supplement their uh, family tree tools. So by 2017, when I learned that, they had actually exceeded the customer base of 23andMe.
Yeah.
And the price was not $999 anymore. They were Black Friday selling it for $49.
Yeah.
So I went a $99 list price. So for the $99 list price in 2017, I did my spit in the jar and got my results. And lo and behold, I found a close relative that was able to tell me everything I needed to know.
Yeah.
So mystery solved. In my book that I ended up writing, Uprooted Family Trauma, Unknown Origins, and the Secretive History of Artificial Insemination, I detail my early discovery of this, my education about the sociological, legal, and scientific history and evolution of assisted reproductive technology, and then the understanding of what my roots were, and the whole process of finding that through 23andMe and the process I went through to find some siblings.
And then how that's an amazing journey, Peter, and just the synchronicities, but how long you had to wait for it all to line up, right? Like it was very much a patience journey and just waiting and hoping that, this information would come to light. So
Well,
once you,
the,
sorry.
the word you used is patient, and I don't have a lot of patience. It was a hard 22 years uh, living my life. I mean, people would say to me, "Well, you're still the same person," and
you know,
you're not in that skin. Everything about me has changed.
yeah. Exactly. And it's like the rug gets pulled out from under you because you've built yourself in these beliefs and this identity on this information that you had. And all of a sudden, like you said, it's just gone. Like that, who am I? Like, what's my heritage? And all these other questions and that trauma that you described going through. So a lot of us go through that anyway. Of like, I think all of us go through multiple times in our lives, like, who am I? That identity. But at least we have the groundedness of knowing this was my mum and this was my dad. Well, most of us,
Mm-hmm.
whereas
Mm-hmm.
you had this idea of this was my dad and then it wasn't. So then you had to go through that. And yeah, I feel like there was definitely a lesson there in terms of patience. Definitely.
But here we are. It's been a lot of years later, and it's been almost 7 years now since I learned of my heritage. I have uh, some siblings. I find that I'm one of a half a dozen. I've met a couple of them. The other ones don't seem to want to know.
Yeah. Yeah, which is fair too. So then how did that spark you in creating the trauma process that came out from that, to share with others to help other people in this situation?
Well, I wanted to write this book, both as a deeply intimate memoir as well as a tell-all expose about an industry that's just out of control. And I had a few goals for it. Number one was to positively impact the practice of assisted reproductive technology. Again, I'm all for the science. Just do it with some consideration.
And integrity.
Secondly, to influence the legislative agenda for what I will call the donor-conceived Bill of Rights, and that hits the half a dozen things that we talked about. Uh, Anonymity has gone away because of DNA technology. Science has made anonymity obsolete. So why have anonymous sperm, egg, and embryo donation? And why not be upfront with it? Uh, Require the health history.
And verify it, right?
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah, verify it as well. Uh, Limit the number of offspring per donor so people don't have 100+ siblings. Create a sibling registry so folks know who they are. Mandate the counseling for donors and recipients about the needs of the donor conceived, and put some real penalties in place, real legal consequences for blatant fertility fraud. It sounds very reasonable. Oh my gosh, puppies, back to my friend with the Rottweiler, there's more regulatory oversight about breeding puppies, about horses, cows, livestock. And then thirdly, speak to the emotional needs and well-being of all people that learn, for whatever the reason, that they are misattributed. Misattributed was a word I never knew before I started researching this. I knew misnomer and misunderstood or misconceived, but never misattributed. That means your DNA and your birth certificate just don't jive. Something is askew.
Interesting.
Now there are 50 million people, 50 million people that are customers of these varying DNA sites. And there are about 5 DNA sites out there worldwide, 50 million. And Pew Research looked at this a while ago, and they determined that almost 1 out of 4 people in that database have had some sort of a surprise when they got their results. 5% thought learned that they were misattributed parentally. Their DNA and their birth certificate just didn't line up. But one out of 4, actually 25%, 27% to be exact, have learned that there's a DNA surprise in there. They have a relative they didn't know, or their genealogy is something that they didn't know. In some cases, their race is different and they didn't know.
Yeah, which is interesting. It's
So that's
interesting.
a lot of trauma.
Mm.
Um, I maintain that the therapy community is ill prepared for this increase in the number of patients that they will have as a result of DNA trauma once that knowledge is out there. DNA holds no secrets. DNA does not lie. And there are a lot of family secrets that can be swept out. So, how can a person be misattributed? Well, for me, I was donor conceived and it was a secret. There's a number of folks that are out there that were closed adopted, they didn't know it. Uh, Extramarital affairs,
Mm.
a one night stand, unreported sexual assault, uh, switched at birth. You could be raised by Aunt Martha, and you thought Aunt Martha was mom, but really Cousin Mary was mom. Raised by another family member. That happens in families even today. Jack Nicholson thought that his mother was his sister, and his grandmother was his mother. He learned that much later in life. That was traumatic for him too. So that happens today.
And then, what advice have you got for people who might be experiencing this? Like, what did you find something that you can share to help people really work through this? Because it is big trauma.
Yeah, good question for that. Based upon my experience with this, number one, just acknowledge the trauma. Acknowledge it. You can't fix what you can't see. Number two, seek all the information you can about it, about you. Number three, get some help, some therapy, support groups, what have you. This is a hard row, and it's hard to face alone. So get some help with that. Number four for me, forgive.
Yeah.
I forgave myself, and I forgive my mother. I forgave some others around. So forgive. Number five, uh, which is partly in my book, reveal. Revealing is healing. No more secrets. All right.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'm at number six now with self actualizing here, helping others deal with the trauma that they're dealing with as a result of misattribution or a DNA surprise.
Yeah.
You can come out whole on this, but it's a hard roll.
Yeah, and then I guess, who you it's funny because like you were saying at the very beginning that you make choices based on things you see your parents doing, so there would have been, I guess, for you this kind of fear that you were going to end up with the same depression condition as your dad, right? So you would make conscious decisions not to be like that, and then all of a sudden you find, actually no, that isn't my genetic predisposition, so I'm going to completely change who that is. So there's interesting like long-term implications in terms of choices you might make for your health as well.
Yeah, exactly. No, I had some adaptive behavior that was negative for my marriage too, and my self awareness of this saved my marriage also.
Yeah, which is one like amazing because you worked through it, and like you said, you didn't hide it anymore. And I often say you need to heal it to feel it to heal it. So you need to let it come out, and you need to let it. And I loved what you said about revealing is healing, because it's so true.
Yeah,
There's when you're not honest with yourself and others around you, and you can't be authentic, then
yeah,
there's this mismatch in the energy that you present to people, and that in itself can be quite damaging too.
exactly.
So, as we finish up our time together, Peter, I asked my guests if they could heal or shift something in the world, what would it be?
What was your question again?
How could you, if you could heal or change something in the world, what would it be?
If I could heal or change something in the world, what would it be?
Yeah.
I can't recreate history. I would love to have known early on about me and talked about that openly
Mm,
with my dad.
yeah. Yeah. So, I guess honesty, right? Like being
Yeah.
honest and open. If everyone was honest and open, how different would the world
Well,
be?
this has given a new dimension to a sense of family too. Let's just talk about that just for a bit.
Yeah.
Um, my Italian cousins, I was no longer Italian, so I was no longer their cousin. And I had cousin Eddie, who was my good friend, about a year older than I. And I took cousin Eddie aside not long after learning this, and I let him know that we were not biological. And his comment is, "Well, that makes you a logical Italian, and that makes you a logical cousin." So the sense of family was, unique experiences that we shared, foods that we shared, conversations that we shared, values that we shared as a family, common enemies that we had with the adults when the kids misbehaved. So we had a lot of good family feeling, and I learned that um, our relationship enhanced when I opened up about this because I created another sense of intimacy that would not have been there otherwise.
Yeah. Which
So
is
it's interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny because I don't know if anyone's experienced most of this, but usually when you're open and vulnerable, your relationships you have with people goes to a deeper level
Yeah.
rather than, oh, we're just together because we're family. So I guess for you, experience it from the other side where you found out it wasn't that biological family. And it's that whole saying too, like the best family is the family you create, because you went and pulled Eddie aside and then you had this really deep and meaningful, and he's like, no, we're still family in that sense. So, it's really powerful.
A spillover there too. I mean, I was a CEO and I had uh, significant leadership that I always thought I was a good leader, but I found that my leadership enhanced when I opened up a little bit with my crew,
Exactly. Yeah, it's definitely.
creating, once again, creating a sense of intimacy that would not have been there otherwise. So this self knowledge increased my ability to lead people.
Yeah, which is such a beautiful insight because, like you said initially, like we think that if we expose that we're a bit weak or need help or anything like that, it compromises your idea as a leader. But actually, when you are more intimate and open and vulnerable, then you create a different level of leadership, right? It comes more from the heart than from I guess, I'm better than you kind of point of view.
Well, leadership 101 is ask questions and listen and ask for help.
Yeah, exactly. And so, as we finish our time together, Peter, where can people find your book and how can they connect with you?
Well, I have a website, www.peterjbonney.com. And there's a little icon there that enables you to connect with me uh, via email. And I do get comments from time to time and questions from time to time, and I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah.
There's a link in there to buy the book from Amazon, but you can go to your local bookstore as well and just say, hey, listen, I like the word of this. The book is available on a worldwide basis as well. So if somebody is in uh, Timbuktu, they can get it.
Perfect. And I'll make sure I'll put all those details in the show notes for you so that if anyone wants to connect with you or find you, they definitely can. So thank you so much for sharing your journey, Peter.
One comment, I'm taking all the proceeds that I've earned in this book and I've been contributing it to an advocacy organization, the U.S. Donor Conceived Council, that is working for that donor conceived Bill of Rights. And secondly, an organization called Right to Know, dealing with these DNA discoveries and a person's right to know their heritage.
Yeah, which is amazing. So, yeah, definitely. And you have that information. I know you've put those links in there for me too. So, I'll definitely make sure that they're in the show notes so everyone can go learn more and contribute if they like and, get on board with such a needed discussion, I guess, and a needed cause. Yeah.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to discuss it with you.
Thank you, Peter. And thank you again for your time and sharing your journey.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to Willow Healing Matters, the podcast. We have so much love and gratitude that you have taken the time out of your day to empower you on your healing journey. The views shared by the person being interviewed might not necessarily reflect that of the host and should be used at your own discernment. Trust what resonates for you and follow your heart and soul guidance. If you have any underlying medical conditions or mental health issues, please consult with your healthcare provider before pursuing any of the recommendations. Likewise, you can always contact the person being interviewed to find out more information. This can be found in the show. Remember to activate, align, heal, empower, and find love in everything that you do.